and the difference between us and like the smartest chimpanzee is like a fraction of 1%.
Right.
And so if all of the difference between us and a chimpanzee is contained in that fraction of 1% of DNA difference, then it's hilarious to imagine the difference between us and something that's 1% more intelligent than us. Welcome back to the Do Less podcast. Today, the long-awaited Aliens episode. John, give us your start bit. What do you got for us?
All right, well, before we dive in, I want to do a little bit of a, I don't know, kind of thought experiment, or maybe some kind of, I don't know what you call it, maybe a game, call it. So let's start by asking you guys, is the Earth flat? What would you say to that?
Is this a trick?
I would say no, it is not
How would you
flat.
answer it? Just go for it. What would you answer? Is the Earth flat?
No.
No, it's not flat.
If I say that the Earth is flat, would you say that I'm wrong?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you say that if I say the Earth is flat, but in my opinion, and the Earth is not flat to you, and we can just agree to disagree, would you agree to leave it there?
Yeah, I would.
You would leave it there, and you'd let me.
I would leave it there.
I would say I think you're wrong. It's silly for you to think that, and I'm good with not continuing this conversation. So yes, I'd leave it there in that sense.
Okay. What if I told you that I plan on traveling to or from the center of the Earth near the speed of light at some point? At which point, at that point, the Earth, the surface of the Earth, all of those points would actually approach a plane, to me, the observer, because as your velocity approaches the speed of light, the surface of the plane orthogonal to which or from which you're traveling actually flattens to a flat plane. So if I specify that my velocity in that scenario, would you then go ahead and say, would you grant it to me that the Earth is flat to me and not to you?
So to clarify, you're going away from the Earth so fast that the light coming from the Earth, from your point of view, is moving so slowly that it looks like a pancake.
Not even just the light, the space the space that the Earth occupies will actually flatten to a plane by my observation. According to the theory of relativity. So
understood. Just wanted to clarify.
So the Earth to me would be occupying a flat existence as I near the speed of light.
I would ask you, how did you get moving so fast, and share me your secrets?
Well, that's a fair question, but that's kind of a separate discussion. All I'm trying to say, so the point of this thought experiment is to kind of show that simply answering a question when there's other assumptions that could be involved is not sufficient in some cases, and we get so used to conversing with each other with set assumptions just kind of baked in. And I mean, in this example, traveling near the speed of light is not possible to humans. So, but the thing is, it's not unimaginable, or it is imaginable. So
but also that conversation would be really difficult, because if you're traveling that fast, in the time it takes me to like ask you, oh yeah, is the Earth flat, that would be like 3 years for you.
Yeah, you have to yell really loud.
Well, like I said,
you'd have to wait like 3
years
years for my answer.
Yeah, the conversation could have happened while we're both stationary, but I'm just saying the Earth, I consider the Earth to be flat because in the future, I'm just thinking about a point in the future. I don't know.
Sometime when you saw it, it was flat. Whatever.
Yeah, right. So all I'm trying to say, to open this episode about stuff that many people might, write off or consider to be not important, if you just question the assumptions that you have, a lot of times you can actually have much more productive conversations by not stopping the conversation before it gets interesting. If you let the conversation get interesting by delving into what assumptions you can kind of unpack and analyze, then there's actually a lot of material to go on.
John, did you just assume that conversation was interesting?
Not at my speed.
No, that was a good thing. I'm just fucking with you. What does this have to do with 5G?
Jeff can only ask those questions because they're not getting into his brain right now.
See,
for our audio listeners, Jeff has a tinfoil cap on.
Oh yeah, this protects my brain from the 5G, which is making my co-hosts low IQ and unable to conceive of the possibility of aliens.
So Jeff, what is the deal with aliens?
I can't confirm that I'm not being controlled by aliens, but Jeff clearly is not. So he's going to be the resident. He's going to be the resident expert.
So I feel like this article kind of got buried in the news cycle last year. We never talked about it. I feel like a lot of people have not talked about it, but it almost feels like a monumental moment in history for me, because there was an article from the New York Times that stated that the Pentagon confirmed 2 videos taken by like infrared cameras aboard Navy pilots of these unidentified flying objects exhibiting really spectacular feats of like propulsion movement without any noticeable signs of propulsion that we would recognize. And then this is also confirmed by multiple eyewitness accounts that were there that day. So I would say we're looking at, if this was like a murder case, there'd definitely be a conviction, because you have video evidence, multiple credible eyewitnesses all coming forward to confirm there was this craft that exhibited phenomenal capabilities, like well beyond anything, at least that is common knowledge of the day. And it just kind of got lost in the news cycle. I just feel like it wasn't made a big deal. Like, not a lot of people talked about it. Many people did not even know about it. And it was like in a legit paper. I'm very critical of the New York Times, but it is a legit outlet. And I don't know. It's just I feel like I want to bring it up because this is a topic that has been so taboo. So like, if you even bring it up, everyone's like you're crazy, you're a weirdo.
Talking about aliens.
Yeah. You just, where's your tinfoil hat? And it's right here. But
I'll make 2 points to that. I'll play devil's advocate here and play the other side for a minute. 2 things that come to mind for me when you explain it that way is that, like, number one, I mean, there's a lot of reasons people want to believe in aliens, right? There's a lot of like human bias that could go into people. Number one, it's a super interesting subject. Number two, people like want to believe in it. So if they can't explain something, often they like to say, it was done by aliens, like the pyramids, right? But when trying to determine something that's like has such huge, massive, worldwide, and scientific consequences of whether or not we've seen aliens on Earth, the burden of proof shouldn't be that of criminal murder case where you need eyewitnesses and like a data point and video camera evidence. It should be held to the standard of evidence required by science to be determined what is and isn't fact, which is like a much higher bar.
I'm not claiming that we know for sure this was like aliens from another planet or anything, or I'm just saying we are pretty much positive that there is something in our airspace that is way beyond our technical, at least common technical capabilities. And no matter the explanation of that, it's interesting. And that's all I'm saying is This issue deserves a lot of attention because at the very least it's interesting. There's no way it's not interesting. And yet, I mean, there is definitely interest in it, but it feels to me that it's I don't know. It's just not a highly talked about topic.
No, I agree. I think two things to that point. I think you agree that just because we have something we can't explain, a UFO, first word is unidentified, just because we don't know what it is, doesn't mean we should jump to the conclusion that it's aliens. But that does beg the question of, well, then what is it? And if it's something that some other human military has, that's equally interesting and also a huge problem for us, right? So that's what comes to mind for me when I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't mean it's aliens. Well, yeah, but then what is it? And to your point, it at the very least, it should warrant a lot more investigation and should, be a bigger topic of conversation. Which makes me wonder, do you think the military is much more seriously investigating those cases because it's a national security risk?
Yeah, so I mean, I covered the article very loosely at first. I encourage you to look it up. It's like, it's probably, if you like New York Times aliens, it's probably like, or like UFOs. It's probably like the first thing that'll come up. We'll link that down in the show notes. But it's just a few more details. So there's this guy, Commander Fravor, and he had a wingman with him, and then there's another wingwoman actually, and then there was another guy, I forget his name, it was like Commander something or other, that actually captured the video. So Fravor was the first one to witness it, and he has like a whole story he's told on like Joe Rogan, Lex Fridman. He's been on the History Channel show Unidentified. He's been all over the place, and he seems like a credible guy.
It's not the guy from the meme that's like aliens.
No, it's not that. It's not that guy. But he's like a Navy pilot for 18 years. It's like just very normal dude, and then no real interest in the subject until he encountered that thing, and he's like experienced. He's been flying planes for 18 years. He's not gonna, unless there's a really, really rare, some sort of natural phenomenon, like it's not like a cloud or something like that. He's experienced enough to know what he's looking at. And then you back that up with the fact that like some of the best instrumentation we have out there was captured it on, their flare cameras, which are like infrared cameras. There's really no mistaking it. There was a craft of some sort doing very spectacular things, like traveling at 10 times the speed of sound, making right angle turns, exhibiting no exhaust or significant heat signature. It was a cylindrical shape, so it had no like wings or anything. So it defies all cursory knowledge of like propulsion, because everything we know about propulsion is you have to push against some sort of mass and send it behind you to send you forward. That's the only way we know how to propel things. And this thing seemingly is not doing that, as far as we can tell. And so, like you said, Dale, if it's not an alien or whatever, if it's, I don't know, Russia or China or something like that, that's probably more terrifying, honestly.
For sure.
Because that means they're so far ahead of us militarily. Or if it's our own military and it's like some super secret, top secret program, that also bothers me a little bit, because I don't like, even if it's our military, I'm not comfortable with our military being that powerful, because I don't think our military is very responsible. So I don't know. It poses a lot of interesting questions.
Yeah.
It's one thing that's kind of an interesting case to consider would be, it's like, why isn't there any, push from the government or from the military to investigate? It's like, one, it's like, well, what would they do to investigate? It's not like you put out like cookies at night, and hopefully the alien craft comes out and gets them, and you can catch them on video. But the other thing is, maybe there's no interest in kind of pursuing it because it's like they do understand what it is, or they do have a baseline to go on. With someone like Bob Lazar, who is supposedly a whistleblower for the like Area 51 operations, where supposedly there are alien craft that we have and we're dissecting currently, and we have references to go off of what the technology is and what it does. If that's the case, then the government's not going to be like, oh, let's go, investigate or do it. Because it's like, well, we know what that is. We have that, and we're working on trying to replicate that. But I guess as I'm talking, I guess I realize there would be some kind of like just like show, like play investigation. Like, oh, we got to find out what that is. We don't know what it is.
Well, there's some merit to that argument because so ATIP was part of that disclosure thing. That was the Pentagon's and aerial. I forget what both A's stand for, but it was like Aerial Threat Identification Program. It had two A's, but something like that. And that was headed up by this guy, Lou Elizondo, who was part of that disclosure and resigned as the leader of that program. And his argument is the government's not putting enough. So that program only got like 22 million in funding, which sounds like a lot, but as far as the government's concerned, that's really not that much. And so his sort of argument that he's going on like kind of like the campaign trail for is the government needs to take this way more seriously and put way more funding into this, which obviously I'm generally skeptical of, just putting more dollars into something. Mm-hmm. But if you treat his sort of intentions as honest, he's gotten some data that he finds compelling, whether it's just the one case I would say there's really only like one really credible case, and it's this one that we're talking about because it has both witness and video of like the same event, and there's not good explanations of something else it could be. A lot of the other cases that like both have witness and video, there's not enough data to like really say it's something highly unusual, right? It could just be somewhat unusual. And so I'd say this is a kind of the most compelling case to me. And so if if he knows additional information and he's like, we just need to study this more because it's a threat, because, we got stuff in our airspace that we can't compete with, then, maybe there's more to this. But I'd actually like to go through essentially when you're faced with very little information, but there's like a seed of something interesting. I like to kind of go through what are like all the reasonable explanations, and then sort of assigning probability in sort of like descending order. Mm-hmm. And then like, I think that is like helpful to sort of put a framework around it. And so, I mean, like I'll just go, one explanation would be what, like we said, it is something made by man and it's just a really well kept secret. But the reason I would put that under low probability is because, one, I don't think the government's that competent. I don't think it's able to just get light years ahead of anything that's on the private market. And then also keep it a secret. Like, this is one of the best kept secrets ever, if that's the case. And then on top of that, why would they test it in front of a bunch of military personnel to witness and then potentially disclose? It just doesn't. It seems like they're trying to leak it, and why would they do it? That doesn't make sense to me. Why wouldn't they just keep it a secret?
To your point, maybe they're just incompetent.
Right, but if they're that incompetent, how are they able to keep it such a good secret and also build something so incredible?
Right. So it's just weirdly a little bit leaked.
Right.
if they did.
Yeah. And if it's like, I don't know,
Seems
if it's some other country, it's the same thing. Whether it's the U.S. or not, it's the same sort of problem.
Right.
So that just seems like an unlikely explanation, is that there's just this secret. It's not impossible, but I might put that at one of the lower probability explanations for it. So I don't know if you guys have any potential explanations.
I don't. I think the big question that comes to mind, obviously, is like, was there in fact some physical object moving at these sorts of speeds and changing directions to a speed and degree that we are not capable of doing, and obviously comes into question whether or not that's a verifiable fact or not. But there's really only like two questions, like, is it in fact what I just described? If not, who knows, could be like a glare on their fucking, windshield, right? But if it is that, then I think we all kind of agree it's something we can't explain right now, and therefore we have to look for the most likely explanations. And the only real two possibilities are that it's military or that it is an alien, and or alien made. And so that's kind of what we're left with. I think.
But there's so much more, Dale.
Go on. Tell me more.
Like you said, it is possible that the data is misinterpreted.
Right.
That is always a possibility. I would also put that at a low probability, because you have many veteran people here, both eyewitness and interpreting their machines. They just and the period at which they observed it was like a whole day. It wasn't like just like in and out, and then they never. It was like a whole day they were observing this thing. So when you put that all that sort of pieces together, the probability that this is just like some misinterpreted data point, I put that pretty low as well. The probability that this is some sort of natural phenomenon, like something like weather or something like that, that seems unlikely to me as well, because again, they observed like a solid object and they caught it like a physical sort. You can see it on the FLIR. It's like it's a contained thing. It's not like a cloud or something like that. So again, I think it is some sort of craft. It is a thing. And then if it's unlikely that the military, anyone's military, is just light years ahead of like the private market. Again, I think that's another reason I think that's unlikely is because innovation tends to happen incrementally. There's almost like no examples of just like someone making an invention and just like boom, like it's available to everyone and it's like awesome and it's amazing and it does all these things. Like generally progress happens incrementally, and so that means they would have to have kept many incremental inventions hidden. Like, it's not like
it's not like this is just the bow and arrow 20 years before the village over from you.
Right.
Or
and
guns 50
years.
And
it's not like push back on that, because it's not like they witnessed some kind of craft that was propulsion. The propulsion magnitude was, orders of magnitude greater than what we've seen. It's not like it's a better mousetrap. It's a different.
No, it is orders of magnitude. It accelerates.
No, because it's not like it's not
the same thing but better.
It's not the same thing but better. It's a different thing.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it's of different kind.
Yeah, like like on the battlefield, if you were you had no comprehension of what a gun was, and then you showed up with your like sticks and rocks, and then they shot you, you're like,
damn, their bows and arrows go a lot faster.
But,
it's not that. It's that
but also think about like going from the bow and arrow to like the musket. The bow and arrow was kind of better, actually. Like the first gun, the bow and arrow was like better than that. It took like a while for guns to get better.
That's interesting.
And so, like for it to be at the point where it's at, where it's just flying circles around our top pilots in the country, that's like a lot of progress happening in secret, as far as I'm concerned. And they so part of the team that like leaked this has like the chief engineer of the Skunk Works division of Lockheed Martin, and they developed the SR-71, which basically holds all the records for like a plane. Like it's the best plane ever invented. And so the guy that engineered that is like, he's like, I don't know what this is. And that was a top secret like program, Skunkworks. So he's familiar with like classified projects. He worked on one of the most like amazing pieces of technology in military history in a top secret program. And he's like, yeah, I have no clue what that is. So that to me is interesting. And then, okay, so I think that before we get to the alien explanation, though, I still think there's some more possible explanations. This could be disinformation, right? It could be an organized disinformation campaign where Fravor's in on it, the other eyewitnesses in on it, the footage is fabricated. They bring in people who they just put like a job opening out there, and if people go, I don't want to do this, then they know that's not their puppet to spread the information. But whoever signs up is like, oh wow, yeah, they're fooled by it. So you just fabricate the evidence, then you put someone on it to investigate, and just let them do all the work for you. That's a possible explanation. I personally don't think that's likely, but it's another thing that's on the table, I think.
Yeah,
seems
more
elaborate.
likely, but
right, like that seems almost more elaborate than it's actually real technology. And then finally, you get the alien explanation. And to me, I'm biased. I'll be honest. I'll be straight up biased. I'm wearing a tinfoil hat. I think the idea...
That's supposed to protect you from bias.
The anti-bias tinfoil hat.
I think the idea of like intelligence coming from other worlds is one of the most intriguing concepts to me. Just from like, if I were to study anything, I feel like that would be it. Like, oh, alien civilization. That's just like, I would want to learn all the differences. Do they have DNA? It's just so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think everyone's interested in that, hence the endless movies and whatnot about it. But yeah, I would like to, now that we've explained like the kind of current events on the world of aliens, I'd kind of like to like take a step back and talk about like just like thought experiment reasoning on like probability of aliens existing, period. I think that's something you guys probably know like a good bit about, but I think we should explain like what's called the Fermi Paradox to people, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's essentially like knowing the size of the universe, which if you ever hear one of those examples where they like zoom out of Earth and describe how many millions of stars are, billions or billions of stars are around the galaxy, how many billions of galaxies are in the universe. It's, if you assign a non-zero probability to the existence of life on a planet, which we have one example of here, then there's a guarantee that there's like alien life out there somewhere. And so, and in fact there should be many, many, many cases of it. And so the Fermi Paradox asks the question of, despite that fact, why have we not seen any evidence of life out there in the universe?
But haven't we?
But haven't we, Jeff might say.
So, not a paradox.
Yeah, right. So why don't we explain, like, kind of, I think it'd be helpful to just think through, like, is it possible that we are the only ones in the universe? Seems improbable, but could that be possible? If so, how would that be possible? And what are the kind of, where can we bracket the possibilities of life in the universe?
Yeah, so there's something called the Drake equation, which essentially takes a bunch of probabilities together and multiplies them, and then the end result is the probability of intelligent life. And so first probability is first number is how many stars are there, and then it's like, okay, how many stars, of those stars, how many have planets, and how many planets are in the habitable zone,
right?
And then et cetera, and you narrow it down to like a certain number of objects that you think could create life. There's a lot of assumptions in there about how life can begin. And then ultimately you need to multiply by some probability of the inception of life, which we know nothing about. We have one data point, so that number, the problem with the Drake equation, in my opinion, is that one number defines the whole equation. Because if that probability is just so insanely low that, you'll get from carbon soup to, some sort of single cell organism,
right,
then it's possible that we are the most unlikely thing that could have ever happened, and the universe probably would only manifest one life form, or like the expected value of a universe is less than one life form, and we could even be a defiance of even the lowest probability. That's entirely possible.
If there was like intelligent design.
Right.
But it seems, highly improbable that if our universe was fit for life, that there would only be one source of it.
Right.
Amongst
That's
the sample size.
Well, so that relies on sort of, it's not actually anything you can prove, but it's sort of like a razor, in the sense of the assumption that you're towards the skew of a distribution is generally a bad assumption, right? Like, if you were just to guess something about your house, am I the most athletic? Am I the most handsome, the most smart? You should probably guess no. You should probably guess you're somewhere in the middle, because that's just probability. So we should guess, in general, we are just average as far as planets go.
Right. I mean, speak for yourself on those issues. But, the Gaston.
But there is actually one problem with that razor as well, is we are asking the questions. So if you're saying, what is the probability there is intelligent life? Well, an intelligent life form is asking that question.
Right.
So it's sort of circular in that logic. So I don't know. There's a whole lot of issues with even this thought experiment.
Yeah, I think another problem with the Fermi Paradox is, which we kind of reference, is the point that it makes the assumption that we haven't seen life.
Right.
And even just saying that fact, you have to ask yourself, okay, well, where have you looked? How have you looked?
Right.
And if you ever look into in what ways have we studied whether or not there are life on other planets, it's like, have we we've sent out radio waves and no one responded in our very local area,
right?
Or they responded to it in a way that's uncomprehendable by us.
Right.
And so what I think is really interesting to ask yourself here is, if someone was like even at the nearest star over a planet orbiting the nearest possible star to our star, they could have sent us radio waves when we had the Holy Roman Empire, and we wouldn't have noticed. So at that point, like, we could be sending radio waves to the next star over, who's like in their Holy Roman Empire stage. They could be like a very developed and smart civilization and still not have the ability to detect the signals that we're trying to send out there. So like the way that we're looking is such a specific bandwidth that like we're looking for someone who uses the same mediums of communication as us, and that's our way of saying, oh no, there's no intelligent life out there.
And they also have to
instead
have
of sending the radio waves to them, we're sending 5G radio waves to ourselves and giving each other coronavirus.
Yeah, and another issue is like there's this. They need to be like congruent with us in terms of technology and their perception of time. So if they are orbiting a much more massive star and they're in a much deeper gravity well, their perception of time is much different from ours. And so our signals may be very incoherent for them to perceive, or difficult. It may be very difficult for us to understand each other's signals because our perception of time is very different. So that causes a lot of problems as well.
Jeff, what's the paradox you were telling me about a while ago that was like a certain point a culture develops like nuclear weapons and then like...
That's the Fermi Paradox.
That's still Fermi Paradox.
Right, so there's this concept of filters, right? So let's say life, you could place the filter of, why haven't we observed alien life anywhere, right? So the first starting point is the first thing I mentioned was maybe life is just very low probability of happening. So if that low probability happens before the inception, then it's going to be very rare. Okay, maybe it's not there. We've yet to identify if that's the case or not. If we found like microbial life on Mars, we could rule that out, right? Because it's the probability that there's only two and they're right next to each other seems unlikely. So we could probably rule that out. Okay, so let's push the filter a little bit farther up and say, okay, life develops, but going from chimpanzees to humans, there's some sort of step there that's really unlikely, right? Because we look on Earth and there's only one species that really does anything that we sort of do.
Anything
there's
cool.
no, right, like there's no...
Actually, that's not true. A lot of animals do some really neat...
All right, but dolphins don't have submarines and chimpanzees don't have, cars. So, like, we're doing a lot more interesting stuff than the other animals.
That's debatable.
But the intelligence that we're talking about is
right.
different, rather than just biological
right.
interesting things you're born with. Yeah.
So there could be a filter there as well. Again, we don't know because we have no idea of what's the probability of going to chimpanzee to human. We just don't know. And then there's another place you can put a filter, which is, when you're as intelligent as us, you sort of create existential risk for yourself, like climate change, nuclear war, just all sorts of existential risk. Also, if there's just a long period of time that this all takes, there's some probability you get hit by an asteroid or solar flare or, just gamma ray burst or something that just wipes you out in the meantime. And so, that could be, again, low probability of surviving all those things. And then if you survive all those sort of filters, and you finally get into space, something interesting happens. So even if all those things are really low probability, if you can become an interstellar species, you can now sort of do very exponential colonization of the galaxy. Once you can get from one star system to the next, it should only take in the ballpark of tens of thousands of years to inhabit every solar system in the galaxy, because you can have insanely exponential growth, right? So if you go to the 10 nearest star systems and they go to the 10 nearest star systems and you're done pretty quickly. So if crossing those barriers are possible, there should be some sort of galactic civilization, and we should have seen them, if all those things were surmountable. Because if it's surmountable once, then they're just sticking around. It's not like the whole galaxy would get wiped out. We would have been able to actually observe an event that could have caused that. We have not.
And the interesting point that I think you posited to me the last time you explained that to me, it's like if it is a matter of being a filter at some point, it's like at what point is it? Because then we know that humans aren't going to get to that point. We're going to be subject to that filter, and it's just going to be like, what is it? Just like too many nuclear weapons are adequate for just like a carelessness that allows for the destabilization of civilization.
Right.
And so it's like that's actually a very interesting question, because that takes the question of are there aliens, and it actually points it right back at us. And it's like, well, if there aren't, why aren't we?
What's that say about you?
Yeah, why aren't we the aliens? It's like,
So it's like,
why won't we become the aliens to some other? It's like, what's gonna put us back into our place? And
so to summarize, like, it looks like no one anywhere on any sun in our galaxy has developed life to the point that it could travel into an interstellar way. We are on a track to someday be able to do that. So it appears that everyone else got stopped somewhere between where we are now and where we're headed, and doesn't seem like they ever got there. So what's going to stop us and what's going to happen to us? Because we're headed in the same direction.
I think the most disturbing thing we could find is that we turn over a rock on Mars and we find there's microbial life there, or even fish in the underground lakes. And then we find out that this UFO case was nothing. It wasn't aliens. That would tell us, okay, we seem pretty alone here. but life is incredibly probable to happen. That's the scariest case, right? Because that basically means doom for us. Because what's our probability of... We're not a particularly old planet, or old species for that matter. Earth has had many extinction events in its history. So the probability that we're going to be first, that's no good. And so, yeah, I would say that's worst case scenario. I'd say best case scenario is we find life on Mars and we find out that, this little UFO has some little green men in it and it came from some solar system. And then we know it's all good. And, it's pretty probable that we'll be all right. But there's no way to know.
And that the green men are down to party.
I think the thing I would like to know most about aliens is, do they think farts are funny? Because I think I think they're pretty cool.
Then we can know if we can relate.
Right.
I also just want to point out to something that a listener may be wondering to themselves is there a possibility that interstellar travel and travel within a galaxy becomes possible, and 50% of the other galaxies have the ability to do this or have the species that can do this, and we're just going to be the first one in our galaxy. Is that possible? I think what you might say is that the sample size of our galaxy is large enough to say that someone else should have already been there, and if not, it's not a good sign for us.
Right. But
Can I say something that's interesting to me about the alien question? And it's like, all right, so what's the applicable steps to take? It's like, assume that an alien encounter happens at some point. It's like, well, break it down. Like, we encounter an alien that is completely has nothing to offer to us and is not really coherent in a way that's interesting. It's like, all right, well, assume that life doesn't really change much at that point, other than be like, oh, that's a cool little looking thing or whatever. It's similar to like if we find life in the deep ocean, or when we do find new species in the deep ocean, it's like, oh well, like look at that thing. It's like
it's
cool,
interesting regardless.
Interesting, yeah. But it's like, so in that case scenario, you don't have to prepare for anything. It's just like a cool encounter. Then there's an encounter where it's like the alien is just so far superior to us that's like it doesn't even interact with us in a way that like, or it does interact with us and it's just so far superior, there's nothing we can really do to offer to it. So it's just either helps us a great deal, at which point we didn't really have to prepare for, or it just wipes us out or exterminates us, which we can't really prepare for. So there's like a bunch of scenarios that could happen that you can't really prepare for. It's not really useful to prepare for. So it's like the two remaining are like, the aliens are like more on our level, and we can either fight with them, or we can either trade with them, or we can trade with them, or learn from them.
Let's do a fun experiment. Let's assume this Nimitz case with David Fravor was an alien. Let's just say it wasn't an AI. It was like a biological thing in that craft from a different solar system. We're not going to get too weird with it. Say it was from a different dimension or whatever. We'll just say different solar system, alien came here. Okay. Let's play with the idea along the lines that John was just talking about, where it was like, why are they here? What could they want from us? What should we do about that? Mm-hmm. Go.
I think the interesting thing to me is kind of actually along the lines of what we already do. It's like, well, we don't know their language. They don't know our language, maybe, or, maybe any of that could happen, any kind of communication that could or could not happen. It's like, well, what's the first step to trying to communicate with an organism you know nothing about? It's like, well, you got to boil down what you know to like the most natural, fundamental characteristics of what knowledge is in our universe. And it's like, display that we recognize those and display that we can take advantage of those. So for example, those radio signals that we send out to just space to just see what happens. It's like we send like the golden ratio and like and pi,
right,
and It'd be cool if we sent like apple pie. We just like just send it on the like.
And
on
they're
the
like,
rovers.
this shit's delicious.
Just in case they have like a
these
glucose.
guys aren't so bad.
They have like glucose sensors, so we make sure to put pie on our Mars rover so that if they ever, here's a pie. But
everyone knows aliens are celiac.
yeah.
They're like, is this
Just pisses them
gluten? What are these guys from 2010?
That shit'll kill you.
And yeah, we just like boil it down to like just prime numbers and stuff that we like know it's like very interesting, or like put farts and stuff. Like it's like this is funny.
Equally intelligent things.
We've boiled down humor into.
You're like, get it, guys?
Yeah.
This is the simplest form of humor. Is like, what is the simplest sound you could make that's funny? It has to be a fart. There's nothing that's like a smaller sound bit that's funnier than that.
Yeah.
Oh, obviously not. I'd like to pose another possible scenario. Let's say, why is this unlikely, or is it a possibility? That there's a number of spacefaring species of aliens that have the ability to, go look at a bunch of different planets. But it's costly to get there rather than, look through their version of a telescope. Mm-hmm. And they see biological life transform through different stages in a number of different planets, and ours being one of them. And on all of those planets, some version of humans, or what looks like us, is so similar to us that that's just known to be a stage of intelligent life before it gets to where they are now. And they look at all of these different examples of life out there, and they kind of just stay hands off for the most part, like humans looking at it through animals in a zoo. And they want to keep it natural, keep it wild, it's like the safari. And they've had contact with a number of different, versions of intelligent life form, the way that we've studied like a specific anthill, but we haven't we haven't had contact with 99% of anthills out there.
Right.
And 99% of anthills out there have no sign of humans existing. So is it a possibility that we just live amongst these creatures and they're looking out at us, and they've studied enough of us that we are uninteresting to them because we're one of a million versions of intelligent life that look like us?
I would say that's definitely a possibility, because we have scientists that will go study geckos in the rainforest, but they don't know every gecko personally, and not every gecko knows of them. But the one that encountered it kind of does, And so it could be that, they've studied us like a zoo, and only a few people have encountered them. But I think that possibility is becoming increasingly...
Well, that's not exactly what I meant. What I meant is there may be...
They're not even intervening.
There's millions of planets that have versions of humans.
Oh, and so they're looking at a different planet, not necessarily ours.
Exactly, and we are just one of billions of planets that look like ours, and they've studied enough to know that we're just one of them.
I would also add to that there seems to be I would give that even more credence, because there do seem to be convergences in evolution, right? So there's two different kinds of things, right? Like, so you can have chaos, right, where you give like an initial condition, and then it's just like could be any possibility, right? Evolution can be like that. So it could completely depend, be very sensitive to initial conditions and many other things, and it just goes random. Yeah. And in that case, probably every planet would be interesting because every single one would be wildly different. But let's say that's not the case. It's more along your case. There's some evidence to that, because eyes, so like our eyes, these things have developed from independent points in evolution, right? So it's not that there's one branch where eyes were developed and everything with eyes comes down from there. Actually, there are many parallel branches where eyes developed later on. And so that leads credence to that. There is some sort of convergent,
biological form. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Which is which is in many ways just based on the laws of physics, right?
Right.
Just the fact that light exists and you detect it, that's true everywhere in the universe,
Right.
for to the point
sound,
and
you
gravity, affects your ability to transport yourself, whatever.
Right, and like locomotion
Yeah.
only can really happen with limbs. Like you can't have biological wheels because that requires like separate parts.
Right.
So it's like, there's just very basic sort of things that are kind of common throughout evolution. John, it looked like you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So to the extent that that's true, that it's also possible that the aliens, well, to kind of engage with that thought experiment, the aliens might not even like recognize that. Oh, that's human, or that's Homo erectus, whatever. Whatever. They would be like, there's a chance that they like consider that like that solar system has a non-homogeneous
like bipedal stage 2 intelligent life form, something that's like
no. So like
generic.
the solar system has like a concentration of entropy that's being preserved at a rate that's this entropy over time. It's like they can point to our solar system and another solar system that's like completely different in a lot of ways, but it's like they're at this level of informational decay over time, or like random events versus pointed events somehow, like some kind of metric like that they like, they could just like look and be like, like that's just they're only transmitting farts at that stage. It's like we're over at like we're over doing something where we're preserving entropy at like some kind of massive order of magnitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These guys aren't even wearing tinfoil hats yet. They don't understand.
They're still using gluten. We've evolved 5 Earth years beyond that stage. They're
not
basic.
Not worth interacting with. Let's talk about.
I would say.
Or you had something.
Wait, yeah. To disagree with that, or bring up another possibility. I would say, since humans are not that old, but we're getting pretty close to making trips to other planets, and then it's not a far leap to say, other stars from there. I mean, it's significantly harder to get to other stars, but I'm just saying, in the grand scheme of things, that's the next step after other planets. It could be that we are some standard deviation above the norm in intelligence, and that an alien, race comes here, and they're much more advanced, but they're actually dumber than us. And so we could actually sort of be a valuable resource to them if they, work with us. Like, think of it, another way to think about it is Isaac Newton is way smarter than all of us, but we know a bunch of stuff that he doesn't know. If we could hand him relativity, he might do so much with that, And so I would not rule that out as a possibility, in all honesty. That seems like totally plausible. And as far as we're concerned as a race, like we trade with even less intelligent or similar intelligent creatures, like dogs. When we were evolving, they're not as smart as us, but we would trade with them. So like, I think intelligence is a really valuable resource, probably.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I was going with what I was saying about the interesting thing to think about is like, what can we boil down knowledge to? Mm-hmm. And what can we boil down value and information to be the most, like, it's like step one, okay, we identify like very interesting things, and we're able to do that. And then step two, it's like, what can we offer then? Like, to be able to like say objectively, what can we offer a society, and like, what can we communicate about our society that we do well, and what do we need, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Like, understanding that would be like very valuable to like opening communications with a life form that we have not a lot of knowledge about.
Right. And also, like, humans, the average human doesn't understand the cell phone, right? Or no one really does all of it, right? Like, there are some people who understand parts of it really well, but no one really could make one from scratch. And that's because we have lots and lots of people who are smart and specialized. And so even if we're not nearly as smart as them, I still think there's a way we could potentially like trade with them, especially if we could get to a point where we do understand their technology a little bit better. And also, like, even if I don't, a lot of people have this idea that like, oh, if an alien civilization came to our solar system, they'd be so advanced that, you know, they'd be like gods. But I don't really imagine you'll ever get to a place where it's like there's no more problems left to solve. You know, like it's just it. Like they've solved everything. You know, I at that point, what's there really left to do? It almost seems like a meaningless existence, and why even keep exploring? Why do anything at all? Like I feel like there's got to be something they're still interested in doing, and it, you know, maybe it is possible if there's no way we could help them with it, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. We could at least start doing some bioengineering to make some people that could help them. You know, I just feel like there's got to be, if we can even conceive of the possibility of like trade or technology, I feel like there's something, you know.
Right.
Yeah, and the kind of scary or like not good part is like the idea of if you came upon like some species of whatever, you know, insect that could provide silk or whatever, you know, some kind of thing that you could use, but the species had like infighting, and it was like so unproductive at making silk because every single little bit of resource that exists, the insect or the worm or whatever, spends 90% of its resources like fighting another worm before utilizing the resource. The person, like the entity going in to like potentially trade with that insect would just be like, okay, they have they're actually not very valuable, you know, or whatever. They can't offer much because they're so inefficient. It's like almost like you gotta, I don't know. It just makes you think like about efficiency in a way that like if you were really to provide value for something, it's like you got to be able to take what you have and present it in a way that is valuable to someone else and not spend resources unproductively. Right. Almost.
Right. So even if we provide value in a way that like bees provide value to us, it might not be the best existence if like the only way we still exist is in like the hives created by aliens to make whatever juices they wanted from us.
Right. That's sort of another thing is if they're significantly more advanced, it could be our existence is in service of whatever they want, not what we want, right? Like in some sense you trade with a cow, right? You feed it, you shelter it, you medicate it, all sorts of stuff. And you get its milk, but ultimately you're going to kill that cow and eat it. So like there's like a Twilight episode about that, right. Twilight Zone episode where, you know, these aliens show up and they're like, oh, we love you, you're great, come with us. And they have this book to serve man, and they can't read it because it's like a different language. And they think it's like they're here to serve man, but it's really like a cookbook. And, you know, it's dangerous to sort of assume they have the best intentions for us because I don't think it's safe for a cow to assume we have the best intentions for it. So I think that's.
But is it better that humans exist at all, or is it better that they exist at all and be slaves to aliens, or you know get wiped out and go extinct?
That is sort of a good question, right? Is it better for cows to go extinct, or is it better for them to be hamburgers? I don't know. I've never asked a cow. I don't know how to. So you know, I don't know the answer to that. But also, if the cow could answer, would we listen? I don't think we would. You know,
very good listeners.
But what I was trying to get at kind of is like Jordan Peterson has this thing like clean your room first before you try to change the world. It's like you can't really make a positive impact on others or for the greater society until you're like get your own shit together. Like you got to kind of focus on yourself and get your own life in order before you can really add enough value to other people. And it's like what I mean by that is like as a society, we gotta get our shit together before we can even offer stuff. Like if someone comes to us and we're like trying to be valuable to them, and it's like, well, you can't provide any value. You don't know how to run a society. It's just like makes you think.
Yeah.
I'm honestly, though, I'm optimistic about human nature. I think most people are good, and then there's a few bad people who take advantage of a bunch of people. And so I would say if we had... Yeah.
Can I just... So
Sure.
human nature is... If I agree with you, human nature is good in that way, but that doesn't necessarily mean... That's like a micro view of human nature. There's also like a macro view of like the kind of saying, it's like weak men make hard times makes strong men make good times make weak men. So it's like those men might have good nature and they might be nice to each other, but it's just like we might be caught in this macro cyclical, like, you know.
Sure. But what I was leaning to was you were talking about like lots of infighting between people. But I think that's sort of just kind of like a game theory problem where it's like we know there's bad people. And so we have this sort of game theory government type situation where it's like we can't just completely get rid of our military because we know other countries will not, right? And so it doesn't allow you to be... The fact that there are any bad people means we all need to be a little bit bad, you know? But if there was some sort of alien civilization, I think it swings that game theory in such a large direction, whether they're a threat or not. It's just suddenly like you have this human perspective and we got to figure out what we need to do, what we have to offer from our global perspective and deal with them, because it's no longer super relevant between us, because either positive or negative, this thing is a much larger value than relations between nations or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So the aliens will make us all play nicely so we can try to
Not
team up
necessarily,
against the big bad
but
guy.
at least focus on something potentially more important than like how to build more nukes, unless that's how you beat the aliens. I think isn't that how they beat Independence Day?
I haven't seen it, but that seems like the likely answer.
I think they just like nuked the mothership or something like that.
Yeah, like what's our best technology? Okay, let's make that enough for the movie.
Just like back in the day, like when Europeans were showing up with guns, there was like a movie about they shoot an arrow in the boat and the boat explodes. It's like that's the equivalent.
That'll do.
It's like got him. But yeah, it doesn't seem to work out well on our planet when like higher technological beings encounter lower ones.
That's generally not a good thing. I think what other fun thought experiment? I think this was like Neil deGrasse Tyson walked through this bit. He talked about the difference in genetic code between us and other species on Earth, and how very similar they are. And so if you use that as the way that you measure difference in intelligence between species, like the difference between us and a banana, like we share like 50% of the same DNA or something like that, and the difference between us and like the smartest chimpanzee is like a fraction of 1%.
Right.
And so if all of the difference between us and a chimpanzee is contained in that fraction of 1% of DNA difference, then it's hilarious to imagine the difference between us and something that's 1% more intelligent than us.
Right.
Then like the smartest ape is, maybe like doing finger painting, with their hands, which like our toddlers do when we put it on the refrigerator. Right. So if they like rolled up our Stephen Hawking's, our most intelligent human on Earth, to the aliens, and he can do astrophysics calculations in his head. Like, oh look, like little Timmy put that on the fridge last week. So like the difference in intelligence that we should expect to find in that minute like, difference in DNA would be interesting.
The analogy of like us sending out the prime numbers like that we've recognized are important, and it's just like the analogy would be like if like a toddler sent out like, oh, the circle goes in the circle hole.
They're like, nice job. I have this idea that one possibility is like maybe aliens think we're cute and they want us to be pets. And the question, like we would like, oh, like I'm not just gonna be a dog, but that's not how it would work. Like when you throw a ball, a dog thinks it's like doing something really important. So they would hand us like really hard stuff to do, but to them it's just busy work. And they would just be like, hey, we need you to do this, and we'll give you this alien stuff. And we're like, whoa, like we're so important. But like we would just be like their pet.
We'll feed.
Yeah, they would tell us to record a podcast, and we'd be like, we're on it. Yeah, we got
like, boy, this is fun. Do you see the background they gave me? It looks like I'm in space.
How am I doing? Good, really good. Good boy.
I also
good
think
podcast.
What you said is really interesting, Dale, because I would say Einstein's like one of those people where it's like I wish we could go back and study that guy a little bit more, because most scientific discoveries are you just observe something and go, that's weird, and then you understand it a little better. But he is completely unique in that he just basically developed an entire framework of math and physics that are very difficult to observe, and made a bunch of predictions that are very, like, we had not observed yet. Like, he just basically came up with all of it on his head with like one tiny little assumption that you could observe. And then from there, people are like, this is crazy. It sounds crazy. Even when you talk about now, oh, time is like relative and stuff like that. And then one by one, they verified every single one. So like a mind like that is like, that's one in every, I don't know how many people there have been, but like 10 billion or something, like as far as humans go. And so it is interesting to think he's still mostly a person, like he's still pretty much the same to the rest of us. So if they are just slightly more intelligent, man, that's hard to even think about.
Unimaginably different. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm running low on time, so I just wanted to say one more thing.
Okay.
Which is kind of that's actually a very positive note we could probably end on. And we started with theory of relativity, ended with Einstein, so it's kind of like a good little button up. So maybe we should end there. But I wanted to, like, one of the conversations we had also in the past was like how kind of evolution will leave traces of, it's like, you'll have vestigial organs or features of a human will like stick around based on what you needed in the past, or like your organism needed in the past, and just pass it on. And it's like we have innate fear of like long, slender, like pale faces with like dark eyes, and it's just like universally just like frightening to humans. And it's just like you can theorize that, like, what was in our past that was beneficial for humans to develop a fear of that face when they recognized it. Or stuff like the uncanny valley is like, if you research that, it's like humans identify human-like objects as very distrustful or like very scary to them. It's like what in our past imitated humans or had those like pale long faces that created that fear and instilled in us. And
I thought you said it was a positive note.
No, I said it was going to be if we ended there, it was going to be a positive note, but I was going to take it on a very negative note to end.
I would say there is a less scary, I agree, that is very creepy, but I think there's a less scary explanation, which is that one of the other hominids, because there were many, was just kind of a dick. And so if you just avoided that one, you were better off. And so it would look very similar to us.
But different.
But slightly different.
I mean, that was the case, right? Wasn't there like Homo erectus?
We don't necessarily know like how much competition there was between them.
Yeah. But I think it's like a legitimately likely possibility that Homo sapiens like wiped out Homo erectus or one of the other homos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's homophobia.
That's the uncanny valley. Is another word for it.
I mean, that's quite literally what it is.
All right, guys.
That's hilarious. All right.
Good
that's
episode.
another good one.
Yeah. Thanks for doing less.
Thanks for listening.